Since the tour of the Four Roses factory was a little bit too long to put into the actual Sojourn episode, I instead have opted to make it its own separate little highlights reel. So here it is. It was pretty noisy in there, so a lot of the time you can't really hear what the tour guide is saying, but you at least get to see the place.
Though it was highly popular, and it was really easy to find the architect who built this transmission style. Well, it's been on the National Register of Historic Places in 1987, as you see on the plaque on the wall. 1911, the first batch of distilling came out of here for bourbon. The building, it's not spring-fed, it has water pump. Grain shed. He will not unload his grain. They'll do a probe sampling like you saw, moisture test the weight, foreign material, and any damaged grain. This sample here they'll keep 3 to 5 days in case they need to come back to it, as well as the rye and the malted barley. Most importantly, they'll do the organoleptic analysis test. That's basically sticking it in that microwave and heating it up for 20 seconds. They're smelling for mold, must, and mildew. Those men that work in here, they're grain farmers in the summer, so they know what they're smelling. The human nose can't be replaced by computers or anything. You will be able to smell that mold, must, or mildew in it. Once it is approved, they'll hit this green button. We'll give him a green light. He'll unload his grain. If he's not approved, he'll get a red light. He'll leave with that load of grain. We don't care where he's going. It just can't stay here. Usually it goes back to the supplier. But we've been dealing with the same companies for 50 years. They know what we expect. They do their own tests there. They're not going to spend the time, the expenses, and the fuel to get here and be bad. It only happened one time last year, and that was because of the corn. There was something wrong with the corn.
They had aflatoxin or something in it?
I think it was moisture. It had too much moisture. We get 3 loads of corn every day, Monday through Friday. We get 1 load of rye every day, Monday through Friday. And we get 1 load of malted barley once every 7 days. Any questions? For about a half an hour and cool down. This is about 62 to 65 degrees. That non-contact water I was telling you all about is in those copper coils in the center. Those copper coils inside that cooker too to keep that temperature cool. They don't want this warmer than that cook when it goes in, so they try to get it about the same temperature. They don't want this hot going into there.
Smell that? You smell it?
So cool.
Smells great in here. It smells absolutely amazing in here.
It's that cooker, it'll come in here. It'll set for about 30 minutes to cool down, like I said. That donut tub that you saw, that yeast tub we brought in to be dumped into here, this is 16,460 gallons. It's about 2.5 stories tall. It's 2%. That donut tub that goes in here is 2% of that. Once it comes in here and it's dumped in, that yeast will start eating up all those sugars in that grain. That inoculation process starts. The byproduct is carbon dioxide. If you can kind of see a little vague vapor over the top of it, that's carbon dioxide that you see. Once that completion is stopped, which takes about 3 days, they'll turn an agitator on at the bottom. It'll start churning. It's like a boat prop on the side. Churn up any of that sediment of that grain. Once that's done, it'll be pumped into this beer well behind me. That's just a holding tank is all this is. These fermenting vats are red cypress from Florida. The reason they use red cypress is because it doesn't add any effect to the flavor of bourbon. Seagram's was replacing these vats with stainless steel that you see over there. Once they found out they were going to be put on the National Register of Historic Places, they stopped doing that. The stainless steel doesn't affect the flavor of bourbon either. Once it leaves here and it's done, it goes into this beer well. It's 8% alcohol. It's basically stale beer at that time. Once it's empty, just like this gentleman just pulled this tarp over top of this vat, it's being steam cleaned to kill any of the contamination and any of the yeast strain from the previous batch when they put a new recipe in it. If there was a previous yeast strain, it would screw up the next batch coming in. That's what he's doing right there. That's steam cleaning. With what you see draining out, inside the doubler there has to be a level of that distillant in there. If it goes over the overfill line, they just back flush it back into here. That's not water, that's White Dog you see, 140 proof. Every 27 and a half hours, 8 of these equals 2 truckloads every day. Once that distilling is done, they'll put it in these tanks outside that I'll show you. Those trucks come to pick it up and take it to Costas Creek. Once it gets to Costas Creek, it'll be put in stainless steel containers until it's ready to be put into the barrel. When it's ready to be put into the barrel, they'll put a hydrometer in it. They'll look in this book and it'll determine how much demineralized water to add to that to bring that alcohol proof down. By federal law, it can't exceed 125 going in the barrel. We put it in the barrel at 120. We have our own pump house, our maintenance. That dryer house you see, that large building, is where the mash is taken and centrifuged. Take the moisture out of it. There'll be trucks that will come and take it to a processing plant for animal feed. It's basically still full of high vitamins and minerals, and they have the wet cake that you saw those guys driving off, local farmers to come and get that for their cattle, and it's high in vitamins and minerals as well. We do have our own fire department on site, and pray to God we never have to use it. Okay, this first one we're going to try is our yellow label. It's aged 5.5 years. It's 80 proof. It's kind of an all-purpose bourbon. You can cooking, candy. It's just as good as for sipping. You'll have a little hint of apple and pear. When I say apple and pear, it doesn't have apple and pear in it. It's those yeast strains that'll give you those flavors. Enjoy that one.
Thank you.
This next one here is our single barrel. It's aged under 10 years. Could be 7, could be 8, could be 9 years. That label that you see at the bottom will tell you which barrel it came from in that warehouse. B warehouse, south side, 34th rig, number 1, so it's on the floor. Letter N, so that letter N is the barrel A to N. Once that barrel's empty, that label will change. It's handwritten by those ladies in that bottle. And this one is 100 proof. This will have a little hint of little fruitiness, a little spicy, a little cocoa maple syrup. Taste a little cinnamon in it. I taste the cinnamon, but it all depends on your palate, what you taste. This is my favorite here. It improves the taste of ice, is what I like to say.
Absolutely nothing can be done to alter the color or alterate the flavor. It must be barreled at no more than 125 proof. It must be aged.
That V strain at the top, that light fruit.
Over the years, the one constant is the dedication
Most
and
aged
commitment to quality. This renowned smooth Kentucky bourbon.
We did have these back here at the marriage, including this.
I'd just like to clarify that the people at the Four Roses factory did in fact give me permission to use the video camera, and yeah, it was neat. It was a fun tour. Very fun tour. I'm not a huge fan of their bourbon, but I'm glad I went. It was very educational. I'd just like to clarify that the people at the Four Roses factory did in fact give me permission to use the video camera, and yeah, it was neat. It was a fun tour.